good afternoon, everyone. Today is September 30th, 2025, and I have the distinct honor to interview Medhat Kamal, the 2023 SP President and Chevron Emeritus Fellow, where he was most recently the manager of Dynamic Reservoir Characterization Group. Med has had a long and distinguished career in our industry, making significant contributions not only to our profession, but also the Society of Petroleum Engineers, or SPE. My name is Terry Polish. Med and I have actually known each other for over 30 years, having first met back in the late 1980s when we both worked at ARC Oil and Gas, and of course most recently serving together on the SPE Board of Directors where I followed him as president. And this recording is a part of AIME's Oral History Capture Program. Welcome, Med. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you, Terry. And I want to start by saying thank you to AIME and SPE for allowing me the opportunity to talk a little bit about what I've been doing. And I want to thank you, Terry, for conducting the discussion that we're having this afternoon.
Thank you, Med. The pleasure is certainly all mine. How about if we start at the beginning, Med? Maybe tell us a little bit about where you grew up, maybe about your childhood, maybe what did your parents do for a living?
Okay, thank you. I was born in Egypt, where, of course, I grew up there. My father was a lawyer, and he worked for the Justice Department of the Egyptian government. So they transferred him just about every other year to a different city. So I grew up in all over Egypt, from the far north to the far south. And one of the points I say about that is I always hear people talk about, this is my childhood friend. We grew up together all the time. I don't have that, because every other year I was in a new school, in a new city, completely different situation. So we stayed moving from city to city throughout my entire growing up. And I only settled in one place when I started college at Cairo University. My mom was a homemaker, and I am one of 7 children. I'm the second one from the top. So we would just have a normal Egyptian family going up, except I just moving from city to city every other year.
Interesting. Wow. So your dad was a lawyer and your mom was a homemaker. So then what influenced you to become an engineer, and maybe even what caused you to go into the field of petroleum engineering?
Actually, there are a couple of things that made me an engineer. Number one, I've always been intrigued with how things work and why do they work that way. I actually remember, the reason I'm saying that, because I remember one of my uncles, he went and complained to my mother that this kid, every time I give him a toy, he does not play with it. He opens it up and tries to find out how it works. So I had that a curiosity to find out how things work. And the other thing is that I don't like memorizing stuff. And I found that in the math classes, I don't have to memorize the stuff. In the exam, they give me a problem and I solve it. Whereas, for example, in the class of history, I have to memorize when did Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt, which year, and all that stuff. I don't like memorizing stuff. So it was easier for me to actually be in science or engineering than be in some other thing. So this is how I started getting into being that part of engineering. You also may ask me about why petroleum engineering. Like reading and learning throughout you grew up, I found out that one of the things about the ancient Egyptians is that they were the first people who ever used petroleum. They actually used tar in mummifying bodies. This is the first known use of petroleum in the history of mankind. So that got me interested into that subject. product that actually dates back to a long time ago from the ancient Egyptian time. So that got me thinking about petroleum engineering. I started reading a little bit about it when I was still in my last 2 years in high school. And pretty much I made up my mind that that is what I'm going to be studying when I go to college.
Hmm. I did not know that about the Egyptians. That is interesting. So your history actually caused you to go to petroleum engineering, but your history also is what caused you to be an engineer. So then you mentioned it earlier, Cairo University, but I know you've gone to other universities besides Cairo. So tell us a little bit about university. Why did you go to the universities you went to, and where did you go?
The way you go to university in Egypt is a little bit different than the way you go to university in places like the United States. Uh, the way it works is that um, in the senior year of high school, there is a general exam for every student in the final year in high school. Take that exam. We all take the same exam throughout the whole country, and then you, based on that, you have your final grade. That is sum of all the grades you get in all the different subjects, and then after that, it's come to you apply to universities and you start going with the people with the highest grade. You have the choice. The higher your grade, you have choice to choose where to go to school. So when I was growing up, that was a time where there was a lot of need for engineers in Egypt. And the people with the highest grades, these are the ones who went to the School of Engineering. And of course, to Cairo University is the oldest university in Egypt, oldest non-religious university in Egypt. So that one was that took the highest grade. For example, if you during this time, if you cannot make it to engineering school, you settle down and you go to medical school. So I studied and I was fortunate enough to have enough grade to allow me to go to whichever school I wanted to. And this is how I joined Cairo University. And as I mentioned, I always wanted to study petroleum engineering, so that's how I started going to Cairo University. You also mentioned that I went to another university. That's correct. So upon graduation from universities at that time, there was a large need for engineers in Egypt. And when you graduate from university as an engineer, you pretty much didn't have a choice to where to go to work. There is a presidential decree that would say you have to go to work in this place. And in my case, the presidential decree was that you have to be a member of the faculty of the School of Engineering at Cairo University, which was fine. Actually, that's what I wanted to do. So and when you go there, you start as we really don't have anything like that in the United States or Europe. It's a position that is kind of like a helping, what we here call teaching assistant, but it is not really a teaching assistant. In order to continue to that, once you're on tenure track, you must have obtain a master degree while within 5 years and a PhD within 7 years. Uh, and I started getting my master degree, and I got a master degree actually from Cairo University, and the rules were that you must have one examiner of the people who are going to examine your thesis to be an external examiner. And based on the work that I was doing, I selected Professor Frank Miller, who is the chairman of the department at Stanford University, to be my external examiner. So he actually, the one who reviewed my thesis, and said, "Yeah, okay, yeah, that's good enough. We can give him a master's degree." Uh, but that also, what it helped was that he actually became very familiar with my work, and there was a fellowship that be given by Marathon Oil Company going to Stanford at that time in order to study what Marathon used to call Maraflood, which using polymer in order to push micellar fluid for enhanced oil recovery. And when I applied to universities to get my PhD, Professor Miller said, yeah, this person, we can use this person. So actually, I think that was kind of lucky break on my part. So this is how I ended up getting a scholarship at Stanford University, because at that time, the situation in Egypt was that you're not allowed to take any money with you outside of the country. You must have all your expenses paid for by wherever you're going, because there was a crunch on the budget. The project was actually a project that was given by Marathon Oil Company, and it was actually given to Professor Hank Ramey, who was one of the professors at Stanford. But Professor Ramey, as probably most of the people in petroleum engineering know, his main area of interest is in the area of transient well testing and things like that. The person who was actually doing the work in the area of flooding and experimental work was Professor Soli Marcedin. So he actually was my first advisor at Stanford, and Professor Ramey used to say that I'm one of the unluckiest people in the United States, because I have two bosses, my academic boss and my financial boss. So this is how I started going to Stanford University.
Very good. Well, go Cardinal. So as you think back, whether Cairo or Stanford Med, were there any professors that you kind of felt were your mentors or that mentored you in some particular way?
I was actually lucky enough that I actually had a lot of mentoring or advice given to me by a lot of professors. I'm going to start by one example. When I was doing my senior project as a senior student at Cairo University, we were the class of petroleum engineering. We were 45 students. And the senior project was a project in order to optimize water flooding for an oil field in the Sinai Peninsula that was called Bala'im field. And that field was actually managed by AIME, the Italian company. So each one of the students was giving a given injection rate to use in their work. And the idea was that by the end of the project, we are going to have cover the entire range of injection rates, because each student will work with one rate. And then you'll be able to figure out which one is the optimum one. I got to remind everybody, this was the day before we have all this fantastic computer programming that we have right now. I was, as I mentioned, we were 45 students in the class. My number was 34, so I was towards the end of the rate. And I finished my work very quickly, and I found that the ejection rate that I was giving is actually way too low. So my professors, in addition to the advisor from E&I, figured out we need to increase the rates that we're giving to every student. So I was complaining to my professor that now I finished the work, and now you're going to give me an additional another rate, so I have to do it again. So he looked at me and he said, okay, so now you have a rate that's lower than anybody's rate. You're going to have your own rate. It may be a good idea if you add another one higher than anybody's rate. And this way you envelope everybody else. And do that. He actually told me, don't complain. Use the opportunity to do that. I learned that lesson. That's a very, very important lesson. That actually was Professor Tahir Al-Hadidi, who was the chairman of the Department of Petroleum Engineering at Cairo University. Another mentor or a person that I actually learned a lot from was Professor Ramey at Stanford. As I mentioned, I was going there and I was working on to get my scholarship. I was working on a Maraflood, where I was actually trying to push polymer to push micellar fluid in a model. That model was lucite. Actually, you need to be able to see it. Uh, so you actually get that lucite, it's large sheets, and you have to cut them into model size to make the model size where you're actually going to glue it together on the model. So I tried to do that, and the department itself did not have a table saw that actually you can cut the thing in there. So Professor Rainey said, you know what? I have a table saw at my house. So why don't you, I'll plan, I'll come on the weekend, I'll take you, and we'll go to my house and we will cut your model. And then that morning he called me and he said, you know what? It's raining at my house. So we're going to do that. I said, so I'm not going to do that. What you need to do is that just let me know what you want, and I'll come back when it's not raining, and I'm going to take the low side game, and I'm going to bring my son with me, and we're going to go ahead and do that. And for the rest of my project, whenever I wanted anything done, I would just leave a note on Professor Rainey's desk. I want this done. And he would come, he would do the thing, he would work there, he deliver back the stuff to my office. It's one of the main lessons I learned. The job, your job as a manager or your job as a professor is actually to make sure that the people that reporting to you have the chance to do their work right. That is your job. Your job is not to tell them what to do. And so that's another example of the things. When actually I was lucky to have, as I mentioned, to have enough people who are actually able to guide me through these things. And I continue to learn from them all the time.
Wow, that's really interesting, Med. So, did you have a chance to do any internships then, whether it was at Cairo or at Stanford?
Yes. Uh, when I was at Cairo University, I actually during my sophomore year, I interned with Shell they have a field in the Sinai Peninsula. It's called Sadr Field, and I actually spent the summer working with them in the field there. I was spent all the time actually on the rig site, uh, and I actually worked on the rig floor. I actually worked several options as a monkey man. So it was very extremely important education. By the time we had learned drilling in the classroom, but actually when you're in the field and you find out how things work, not everything you calculate get done the way you calculated because it is different. So I interned when I was in my sophomore year. Now in my junior year, I was lucky enough. I did an internship with Kuwait Oil Company in uh, in Kuwait. And again, that was one of the where I learned a whole lot because, as everybody knows, in Kuwait and this part of the world, reservoirs are extremely permeable, flow rates are extremely high, and I remember that one of the jobs, I wasn't actually doing the job. I was just, like helping the engineer because I was just a student. We were actually fracturing the well that was making 20,000 barrels a day.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Fracturing that. That was actually on the north side of Kuwait. So I learned a lot about the thing. And when I went to Stanford in my first year, uh, I got an internship with Pan American Oil Company, which is later got to be known as Amoco Oil Company. And I got my internship in Lafayette, Louisiana. I spent the whole summer there. Actually, spent most of the summer in the Gulf, actually offshore on the first floor on sitting platforms, doing a lot of logging. And somehow uh, they liked what I was doing. So they said, okay, from now on, whenever you want, you can come back in the next summer. So from that point on, whenever I had some time off, I went to work for summer. For the summer, I went to work for them. I wasn't going anymore after that to Lafayette, but I was working in their office in Denver. And even they told me during the Christmas break, Christmas holiday, show up. So I used to show up for 2 weeks, get one paycheck. And that was, of course, very important for a student. Everybody knows that. So by the time I finished all my work at Stanford, I had accumulated enough working time with Amoco that I was eligible to get a vacation.
Wow.
I already had 1 year, so I was able to take vacation. And that was one of the main reasons I decided to start my work with Amoco.
Well, that's great. I mean, you did a lifetime of just in your internships. I mean, Sinai, Kuwait, the Gulf of Mexico, and then Denver. That's awesome. So Med, it sounds like your first job then was with Amoco. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what was would you remember, like, what was your first major project when you were at Amoco after graduation?
At the time when I graduated, that was the time where enhanced oil recovery got to be at the forefront of our the challenges that we have as a petroleum engineering. So Amoco was working on micellar flood in Sloss Field, which is in Nebraska. And one of the important things, of course, we want to do is that we need to have a more detailed characterization of the reservoir, because we all recognize that we have a lot of challenges with micellar fluid and polymer. And you can imagine how this is an extension of what I was doing experimental work at Stanford. So we wanted to actually have a better characterization of the reservoir. After I started doing experimental work at Stanford for my PhD, I actually shifted and went to the area of well testing, transient well testing. And I did my PhD on pulse testing. So I volunteered by saying, if we really want to have a very detailed description for that pilot that we are doing, the Sloss pilot, then we actually need to do pulse testing among all the wells in order to figure out exactly if these wells are connecting with each other or not. So I was given the chance, yeah, go ahead and do that. So I went to the field, which is, by the way, one of the things that helped me a whole lot. And it actually became one of the points I always tell people, especially the young engineers: find a way to go to the field. Whatever it is, find a way, find an excuse to go to the field. You learn a whole lot. So I went there and to the Slush field, and I actually did the testing. It was only a 10-acre pilot. That's it, and it was chosen because it was supposed to be a homogeneous. It was supposed to be all the wells, the 4 injectors and 1 producer, all of them to be in communication with each other. Simple stuff. But when I actually did the pulse testing, I found that that's not the case. These wells are not in communication with each other at all. Some of them were not. And of course, that stuff we published papers on that later on. And it became one of the things that opened everybody's eyes. But from that point on all the enhanced oil recovery projects that Amoco did, whether it was in the Rocky Mountain or in the West Texas, we actually did extensive pulse testing on all of them, and that became one of the major things that took a lot of my time and that. So that was a very nice work, a very interesting work, and very educational as well.
Wow. So as you think back of kind of those early days, Med, was there anybody who stands out as a mentor again, or someone who influenced you in your career as you kind of were getting started?
Yeah, a lot of people. One more time, I really think I'm on it. I'm lucky that I have that many people work with me and teach me. One of the people that actually influenced me a lot is the late Howard Hall. I'm sure everybody is aware of the Hall plot. Howard actually did that work when he was doing his master student at work at University of Tulsa. Howard had his bachelor work at Oklahoma State University, but he was my boss at my first boss, my first industry boss at Amoco. Whenever he gave me an assignment, the way he actually would sit me down, more important than telling me what he wants me to do, he always tell me how important is it for me to do that, and how important is it for the company to do that. It actually all the time gave me the feeling that I'm actually doing the most important thing for the company. Without me, the company's it's not going to work. But that was a very educational point. One of the things actually continue after that, after graduated, and now I'm going to uh, meetings, and I'm going to attend the conferences and things like that. And I met Professor Rainey one time at one of the SPE conferences, and he told me, "Are you gonna go listen to this paper?" And I said, "No, I really know the subject of that paper." And he told me, "Even if you think you know the subject of the paper, if you're smart enough and you listen, you're gonna learn something new." And that paper actually was being presented by uh, Professor Raj Raghavan at the University of Tulsa. He was still a young assistant professor at the time. And sure enough, you learn a lot from doing that. So it doesn't matter if you think you're knowledgeable enough that you know the subject. If you listen to somebody else talk, you are going to learn something technically, and that will help. So, as I mentioned, yeah, I got a lot of mentoring and help from a lot of good people.
Yeah, those are wise words to live by for sure. So you started at Amico, and then what's kind of just take us through the rest of your career progression, Med. You know who you worked for, maybe where you worked, if that it was different locations.
Yeah, so I started working at Amoco, and Amoco was in the research center is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is a beautiful city, just a mid-sized city. And then I got married, and my wife is a physician, and she wanted to continue to pursue her career. Tulsa, as I mentioned, is a mid-sized city, so there weren't enough work for her. So we figured that we really need to go to a bigger place. And at that time, some very good friends, very good smart people at Petroleum Johnson, with a company of Schlumberger, they were talking to me about, "Oh, you done enough work for an oil company. Maybe you can come work with us and see the experience." And of course, because we wanted to move to a bigger city, Houston. So I accepted that work, and I went and I spent some time with Flow Petrol and Schlumberger. And I found out that I'm not very comfortable working for a service company. Of course, we know that service companies, as oil companies at universities and government, they are all integral parts of our industry, and they are all very important, and they are all doing excellent job. And Schlumberger was a good example of that. It just I was more comfortable working for an oil company than for a service company. And this is maybe because when I first graduated from school, how this is who I started working with. So, so I figured out I better really work for an oil company again. Schlumberger people were extremely nice to me. We didn't have any difficulty or anything like that. But then, of course, we had to go to a big city. So at that time, we went to the Dallas area, and I started working at the research center of ARCO. This is when you and I started crossing paths in our work. And I continued to work with ARCO. That's another very, very good company. I actually had what I consider the good fortune that to work on some of the best, largest oil fields in the Western Hemisphere, Kuparuk, Prudhoe Bay, and so on. And I actually enjoyed going to Alaska a lot. So I continued to work with ARCO until the year 2000, when ARCO merged with British Petroleum. And at that time, one of the things was tugging me also at the same time is that I really wanted to go somehow back to California, where, when I first came to the United States, I went to Stanford. So that was an opportunity for me. I moved with Chevron in the year 2000. And I started working with Chevron actually until now. I retired about 3-4 years ago, but I'm still working with them as an emeritus fellow. So I'm still working with them. One more time, that experience, varied experience with Chevron, after ARCO, after Schlumberger, after Amoco, which was after Cairo University, where I actually learned that I really don't enjoy teaching that much. Uh, uh, so it actually cemented my belief that our industry is really full of very excellent people, because everywhere I work, I actually found a lot of support. I found a lot of people who have valued your work. Our industry is not very large in numbers, as we all know. Like, for example, the Society of Petroleum Engineers, all of us are less than 140,000 worldwide. So you end up finding that if you know a lot of people, you work with them in different projects, in different capacities all the time, and you find that for the major part, it's very collaborative, uh, exciting work. So it's an excellent industry.
Yeah, for sure. So, Med, you've kind of touched on a little bit of some of the research and some of the work you've done, and you've certainly had a lot of different experiences and things. What would you, if I asked you to brag just a little bit here and just tell me what you consider some of your largest contributions to our industry? I know what I would think of them, but I'd like to hear from you. What do you consider some of your best work, and how you feel like you really made contributions, whether it's research or work or what have you?
Most petroleum engineers know that what 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 is very exciting about our work is that we work with systems that we did not design. These systems are given to us, and we have to figure out what they are. And for that, we are similar to our friends, the mining engineers. We also are similar to the people who do meteorology, the meteorologists, because both of them work with systems that are given to them. But in their cases, both of them, they actually can see their system, they can touch their system. We don't. So our biggest challenge is to characterize our system. And that is what I found to be the most interesting part. This is where I did most of my work, is reservoir characterization. And in order to do that, we actually have to use all different types of things, whether it's geologic description, the information that we get from seismic, what we get from static measurements like logging, what we do from dynamic testing, or what we go from the data that we obtain while from the production history of the wells. So an integration of all the information you get from all the things in order to be able to characterize the reservoir and be able to finally get a model that will allow you to predict the performance of the reservoir under different conditions and different scenarios. So you actually go ahead and find out what's the best, how the project works. That is the main part, which I think that I made my biggest contribution to industry. A lot of my research is about how do you use data from different groups, different sites, in order to characterize the reservoir and figure out what's based. Once you do that, you figure out what's the best way to go forward. What are the best projects? Do we go with water flooding? Do we go with tertiary recovery? Is it important for us to fracture big fractures everywhere like we did in our history? So all the things result from the fact that we need to characterize the reservoir first. It's a challenging and it's actually very exciting work.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail as far as what I would have said at ARCO. I mean, I just remember being in Alaska and saying, how many times did we say, well, we have a well test question, we have a characterization question. Let's call up Med Kamal. He'll help us out. So definitely remember that. So what do you consider then, Med, maybe, what were some of your biggest technical challenges that you experienced?
The biggest technical challenge that we have in our industry, which of course were major, is that we have a lot of data. We are actually swimming in data, but this data come in different shapes, different forms, and they don't measure exactly the same thing. And then our thing that we need to put all this data together in order to find out what is the system that we're working with. And actually, once we started doing working with a given production system, like we're stimulating the wind, we're fracturing the wind, like we're going to go with water flooding. Then we have the data that continue to come at us, and we need to continue to work with that in order to figure out what is the best way to go to the next step. So the data that we have a lot of data, especially with now that we have, for example, downhole pressure gauges in every well. When we do any logging of a well, or we do any fracturing of a well, we have a lot of data that come with us. But so we need to, all this data need to be, they come in different groups. You need to synchronize them, make them work with each other, and need to recognize which part of the data is each one of is telling us. And here is a very specific example. I remember when I was working at Amoco, and one more time, I really, when I was lucky, was really working with some of the smartest people in the field. So I was working with Mike Smith and Ken Nolte, and they would go ahead and fracture a well, and they come back and they say, we fractured that well, and we created a fracture that is 500 feet long. And I go ahead and test the well, and I said, no, it's only 100 feet. It's the same fracture. Their numbers are correct, and my number is correct. They actually cracked 500 feet in the reservoir, but only the 100 feet next to the well that's actually contributing. The other 400 are still sitting there, but whether they are there or not, that's not going to change the thing of the well. So that is a good example of how we're calling them the same. We're calling the fracture length, but it's not the same number. So being able to understand the different information, all the different pieces of technology we're giving us in order to put them all together and manage our field, it's a challenge, but to be honest with you, it's fun. In order to when you figure it out and you say, now I know what that thing is, that's fun.
Well, it goes back to your point earlier that just one of the beauties I've always thought of our profession is we've never seen up front and close what we're working with. And so it's always up for interpretation and it's up for debate. And that's what we do as engineers. So, yeah. So Med,
This is why we are unique.
Yeah, I agree with that. Exactly. Exactly. Um, and by the way, that's always why we're always right. So, Med, you were, of course, 2023 SP president. You had a theme of Petroleum Plus Plus. I know that was a very near and dear to you endeavor. And so tell us a little bit about that theme and why you thought that was important.
Yeah, that team came from the fact that we are having a lot of discussion about energy, the different types of energy that the world need. And there are different groups, that different groups talk about projections, about what type of energy, when are we going to use energy from. One of these groups are the major international companies like ExxonMobil, like Chevron. And one other group are the group like government entities, like in the United States, we have the Energy Information Administration, or in Europe, they have the International Energy Agency. And then they have a third group, which are made of mainly of the countries, that, the national companies, like Aramco and Petrobras and Petronas. And all of these groups actually talk about where are we going to get the energy from? Uh, we all agree to start with that we would be needing more energy than what we have today. Two main reasons. Number one is that the number of people living on the planet right now are 8 billion. By the year 2050, there will be 10 billion people. So we need 25% more energy. And then, of course, the increase in the standard of living everywhere. So we need more energy. Where this energy is going to come from? And all these three groups that I mentioned, they come out with projections, and they vary a little bit, but they are all similar. And they all talk about that we will be needing hydrocarbons, specifically oil and gas, for a long time to come. Meanwhile, we need to be making sure that that energy that we are producing does not harm the environment. So when we talk about, maybe we need to find energy, and we need to be cognizant about our effect on the environment. And the third part with that is that all the energy that we're going to be producing from oil and gas is not going to be enough. We need more energy from other sources as well. So uh, the main points, it comes to point that we will be needing to produce oil and gas for the foreseeable future. I know that the latest projections, for example, from British Petroleum that showed up maybe about 2 weeks ago, talks about that the need for oil is going to continue to increase at least until the mid 2045 or something, and then that may go to plateau after that. Same thing for natural gas. This is just one example, but all of them are similar to that. So we will be continue to produce oil and gas. And in order to produce oil and gas with a larger quantity, although the percentage of of the share of the oil and gas in the energy mix, the percentage may decrease a little bit, but the total volume is going to increase. And in order to do that, we will be actually needing to do more development of what we are doing today. The technology and the work that we're doing is not enough. So that's one thing. And the other part is that we don't live in a vacuum. And of course, we all need to keep this planet for ourselves. So we need to be very cognizant about, we need to do things the best possible way in order to reduce any harm to environment. This is the first plus. The first plus is that making sure that we don't harm in the environment and actually do everything as clean as possible. And then the third plus is that there are additional forms of energy that we're producing, and petroleum engineers actually have a very important role to play in producing these additional parts of energy. Like, for example, when we talk about geothermal and when we talk about hydrogen, these are additional forms of energy that actually, for us petroleum engineers, we're the one who are going to be able to produce that. And for the part about the protecting the environment, the first plus, we have a lot of work to do on that. One of them, for example, is to make sure that our operations do not add as much as possible as greenhouse gases to the environment. Our operations are the one who are actually be able to capture CO2 and actually keep it under the ground for a long time. Because right now, this is still the most viable way of reducing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And then we also have added to the part about the energy we're doing. The amount of energy needed is actually now increasing a whole lot more as we start talking about artificial intelligence and the amount of projects that we're doing that. And some of the work that some of us are doing right now is they're saying, okay, maybe what we need to do is that we need to have our energy production areas very close to the data management facilities, these huge facilities, these huge data hubs that companies like Microsoft and Google and Amazon are all talking about building. Maybe we need to have our facilities very close to them in order to be able to immediately deliver that energy to them. There are some talk in the industry about using nuclear energy for that, but there is also a lot of work that will be done through natural gas, where we're actually going to be able to have our facilities, gathering facilities, very close to the people using the power. So this is where the Petroleum plus plus came from. It actually say that as petroleum engineers, especially as the Society of Petroleum Engineers, we are going to continue to be responsible for producing more oil and gas. We're going to be responsible for mitigating any climate issues because we are an integral part of that work, and we are going to be working on additional forms of energy as well. So our form is expanding, and as some of my fellows petroleum engineers know from the things I write discussion, I really like the term energy expansion because in my opinion, it's more descriptive to what we're looking at than the term energy transition.
Well, I know your theme was a really good jumping off point for me, so it set a really nice stage. So, Med, I'm curious. I know you've received many awards and honors over your career, both at your companies but also at SPE. Would you care to tell us just what some of those awards are, and maybe ones that are were the most meaningful to you?
The first award I got was the Cedric Ferguson Medal, which is the award that's given to the best paper published by a young professional under the age, when I was there, it was under the age of 33. Now it moved up to a little bit under the age of 35. But when I was there, it was people under the age of 33. So that was the first award that I got. And it actually made me more appreciative to SPE more than I already have been. Because it actually gives an idea, they actually do value your work. They actually have a system by trying to do vetting and explaining. And I continued to work with the society because I really like that. As I mentioned before, I mean, from the beginning, from the days I was in high school, I was passionate about petroleum engineering. So as a result of that, I got additional award, like for example, I got an award for the Formation Evaluation Award, this international society. I worked a lot with the society based on like I reviewed papers. I work as the executive editor of JPT and SPEEE. I worked on the board of directors of local sections that I lived in, whether it was in Houston or in Dallas or in Tulsa or in the Golden Gate next to San Francisco. So I got regional awards for that, for the service award, which of course I appreciate that. And then after all the work, after all the years, I was lucky enough to be nominated to be an honorary member of SPE. And that kind of like, crown the achievement, actually make you, one more time, make you humble, make you really recognize that, yeah, the work, you continue to do the work because that work is actually going to be recognized. And one more time, it's by the, in my opinion, by all these good people that we have our own industry. So each one of these awards actually made me more eager to do more work, and actually make me humble on the thing that on the this is for the society. On the employment part, being selected as a fellow of Chevron, and being selected as an advisor before that when I was working with ARCO, that was again, these are technical recognition more than things like fellows at Chevron, that are people who are actually doing technical work that actually does two things. Number one, it actually adds to the bottom line of the company. That's important. And then it also must have visible help for the industry as a whole. So internal and external. One more time, these are humbling recognitions that I will always value. I always value them.
So I do want to talk more about SPE, but before we do that, Med, um, awards and honors, a distinguished career, none of that stuff happens without your family support and things like that. Tell us just a little bit about your family, and what was the impact, maybe good and bad, of your work on the on family life, and then how did they support?
I was lucky enough to have a lot of good mentors and good people for the industry. And actually, I would say that I'm luckier, even more lucky than that, for my spouse. I mentioned at the beginning that because when I got married, we wanted to move from Tulsa to a bigger city for my wife to pursue her career, which of course she did. But she was all very supportive for all the work that I was doing. Our work not only for SPE, but also our work for a company. Petroleum engineers, drilling rigs work 24 hours 7. 24 hours, 7 days a week. One of the things that I always to say is that, and it's true, wells like to be cased, fractured, logged, or tested on major holidays somehow.
And at midnight.
So there is a whole lot of time where I actually have to spend major holidays at Rigside. And and my wife was accepting that. She knows what I was doing. And of course, I was spending all the time I need with my family as well. There is one example I want to say that. So it's 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings, I pick up the phone, and one of my good friends at ARCO, John Vogel, he started asking the question. He didn't say, I am sorry I'm waking you up. He didn't say, what I'm waking you up. He started asking the question, we have this data, what do they mean? And when are we going to be able to show up? We were talking about that time, we were talking about a discovery that ARCO has done in the North Slope, the Covalum discovery. So uh, my wife, like, what is that? I said, no, this is work. So that's fine with her. So she was always extremely very supportive. And I'm also, by the way, very supportive for her. So she moved with me as we move across. And I have two children, a daughter and a son. I'm blessed to have both of them. But I also, in addition to my work, I actually did all my work with them. I grew up in Egypt, where there is only one sport people play there. Unlike the United States, where people play football or baseball or basketball or hockey, in Egypt, there is only one sport, soccer. So I grew up doing there. So when my kids were growing up, I was the coach of their soccer teams.
Right.
Enjoy the thing, can never, I mean, experience that taught me a whole lot, and I actually was very important, very helpful to be a part of them. But as my job took me away from them, and whether it's day job or volunteer work, they were all have been very supportive, and I'm just simply lucky to have that.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, Med, let's go back to the society discussion. So, when did you, I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but when did you first hear about SPE? And maybe how did your SPE involvement progress over the years?
Sure. So I actually heard about SPE by chance. So one more time, I was an undergraduate student at Cairo University, and I'm working on my project, and I am looking at all the different publications that are available to you. So there is, and I actually have a whole lot of respect for publications like Oil and Gas Journal and World Oil. I'm looking at public, but then there was this publication called Journal of Petroleum Technology. And so I was looking at the publication and things that the Journal of Petroleum Technology really have a special meaning for it. Their papers are a little bit more in depth, they're a little bit more technical. I really want to have a subscription to that. And you cannot have a subscription to that. You need to be a member of SPE to have a subscription to that. And as I mentioned earlier in this our discussion, we're not allowed to take any money out of Egypt. There is no such thing that you can spend money to be a member of the society. So I couldn't be a member of SPE. I couldn't get copies of JPT. So it's one of the main things that I have in my mind is that as soon as I go to the United States, I'm going to be a member of SPE so I can get JPT.
Wow.
And that is actually true. I mean, I actually keep on telling the story. I actually arrived in the United States on September 18th, and on September 20th, I submitted my application to SPE just because I wanted to have copies, access to GPT, and it became a very rewarding experience. First of all, you learn a whole lot from the publication. You learn a whole lot from attending meetings, from things like when I was a student. One of the first things that we used to do is that there was a monthly meeting of the Golden Gate section, which was in San Francisco. So just one more time, it depends on how show people how lucky we are. So every time there was a meeting for SPE, our professors they would bring their family cars, which used to be station wagons at the time, not SUVs like these days, and they load them up with the students and drive us to San Francisco, where was actually very important learning experience to there, where you actually go there and you meet all these people. And I remember all the uh, um, professionals, professional engineers, whether working from Chevron at that time, which by the way was called the Standard of California, wasn't called Chevron at that time, or Standard of Ohio, which was at that time. How they treated us, how they worked with us, how they uh, 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 welcomed us as students to the member. And then you learn a whole lot from attending meetings like that. And then as I started learning, okay, maybe I can work with the society. Found out that there is such things as the student chapters. So with two of my colleagues, we actually established the Stanford Golden Gate student chapter. And I know that I tease all my friends from University of Texas when I tell them that Stanford chapter, student chapter, is older than the University of Texas student chapter. Look it up. Uh, of course, both of them are excellent places. I have to say that my daughter graduated from there, from University of Texas, so I better be nice. And then I found out, like, as you volunteer and work with the section, you learn a whole lot. You actually, the networking, the interaction, where you're sitting in a meeting and you're looking at the different projects other members of the section are working on. You learn from them. One of the things that people sometimes don't think about it, when you write papers for SPE, you learn a lot because you write the paper get reviewed, the reviewers actually start asking you questions. that make you sometimes think about, maybe I better check that out. And you actually learn more while writing the paper than you may think. I thought about that. And of course, I did my work also as a volunteered as being a review chairman, and then an associate editor and an editor, executive editor for both JPT and SPEREE. In addition, I worked in the sections of Tulsa, Gulf Coast, Dallas, and the Golden Gate section. And I was lucky enough that I was able to actually serve as the chair for both the Dallas section and the Golden Gate section. And of course, as a result of that, I served on the board, the International Board of Directors. And you really learn a lot about the society, of all the work that's being done, and the intricacy of all the things that we are doing. Right now, there is we are having a discussion about what is the best way to manage our society based on the challenges that we have. I see, for example, last column that's written by our current president, Olivier Ouzé, have a whole lot of discussion in it. And I find that the discussion that it exists right now on the management part of of SPE that's pointed by our next president, Jennifer Miskins. So working with people, you actually learn more about the industry, learn about the challenges that we have, and that will actually make you appreciate more and more the work that we've done, and actually kind of invite you to contribute to the thing. So it is SPE is being a member of SPE and being active member of SPE is definitely you benefit more than you actually put the work in.
So, Med, would you care to be specific on maybe a couple of things that you think being a member of SPE has kind of benefited you specifically in your career?
Yeah. Number one, the main thing is the technical knowledge.
Yeah.
The technical knowledge that you get from all the publications that have been done, from attending all the seminars, from attending that. That is number one. Number two, the networking. The networking that you will have with meeting members from all different types of parts of the industry. And as I mentioned before, our numbers are not very large. You actually end up knowing a very large number of people, and that will be helpful. In my opinion, you can pick up the phone and call a friend in the other part of the world and ask a technical question. Of course, if we're all smart enough and we all diverge in our trademark information or proprietary information, however, you can actually learn a whole lot from that. So it is enriching your technical knowledge from publications, seminars, networking, and also you're having fun learning, working with meeting some really very dedicated people.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, my next question was going to be what you would tell a new graduate, but I think you just told me that. That's kind of the benefits of being an SP. But let's just say this: speaking of young members and new graduates and young professionals, as you know, even when you were president of SPE, we continue to talk about kind of our challenges with attracting young people, not just to SPE, but maybe to our industry. And maybe give us some thoughts on your opinion on what can we do, whether it's SPE or as industry, to help attract more young people into our industry.
In order to attract more people to our industry, that requires work from all of us. And the main point is that to continue to try to explain why we matter, and that we are going to be an important part of the energy solution for a long time to come. And the contribution that we are doing to every place we work. For example, look at where Guyana work are now based on the work that ExxonMobil is doing based after the discovery that they had in the recent years. Look at the advantages that different parts of the countries of the world benefiting from having the oil industry as part of them, and how they are actually moving the standard of living of these countries. And we're not talking about only salaries, we're talking about work that we're doing with uh, schools, hospitals, and so on. But it is important also that we need to be supporting our young professionals and students by providing them with this information. We need, one of the things we can do is that we can develop materials, uh, lectures, but lectures need to be developed by people who can actually know how to reach students at universities. Maybe not us petroleum engineers who are more technical in thinking rather than human interaction, where we actually be able to prevent them for them to recognize that you are in a field, you are studying to be in a field that is very important to the well-being of mankind. The standard of living that we live in does not exist without energy. And and this is needed. This energy is needed in the different forms, and whether it's one more time the petroleum plus and all the three phases of it. And it needed to be done, and we need young people to do that. And we will be needing to do more technology as the technology is going to advance. One of the main things about our society, a society of petroleum engineers and our industry, is that we recognize the value of continuous development, continuous improvement. The first fracturing job that was done used 49 gallons of fluid, 49 gallons. Now we're talking about what we use today, and how it changed. For example, when we went to the era of massive hydraulic fracturing in the 80s, and all the technologies that we need to develop to do that. And now how we use that technology now in order to be able to produce new forms of energy from tight formation, shale formation, where we're actually are creating reservoir type rock from source type rock. So this is continuous development. This continuous technical development that's happening, and is going to continue to happen. We can also talk about the advancement in drilling, that how far we can drill, the pressures that we are working under. I apologize for I don't remember which CEO of one of the oil companies talked about, like the pressure we encounter right now in some of our deep water wells is like if an elephant is standing on top of a dime, which is, by the way, correct. That's a correct analogy. It's a correct number. I hope he calculated it right, but I think he calculated it right. So we continue to develop. We are doing a whole lot of development in our industry by using things like data analytics, we're using machine learning, and we're using artificial intelligence. We are doing a lot of development in these areas right now, and requires a knowledge of petroleum engineering knowledge, in addition to the knowledge of the so-called technology area. But we are doing that work right now. We are developing artificial intelligence work. We are doing that. Of course, we're smart enough. We're doing that in collaboration with some of the companies that they have people specializing in that. And we were going to continue to do that. So the technical development of our field is going to continue to expand, and it will, like it has been done before, and we can actually give the example, prove to you over the last 100 years. Look at what we've been doing, and now we're going to continue to be doing that. We need the energy in petroleum engineering. We need that. We're going to continue to development, and whether it is in the petroleum engineering traditional areas or the additional areas like machine learning and artificial intelligence and data analytics and so on. So we need you, the world needs you, and you are actually going to have a very important part to play in the life of people worldwide.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard sometimes for us to explain just some of the cool things that we're doing. the things I think that would surprise a lot of young people. So I agree. So, Med, just kind of a few questions about kind of as you kind of look back on your career, kind of as a whole. Thinking back, what would you say has been a part working in this field has been particularly meaningful to you, or maybe what has been your favorite part of being in the industry?
As I think of my career, first thing I do is I'm really thankful to God for blessing me to be able to do the work that I was doing in this area in the industry. I also find it was a very exciting career because of all the challenges that we have, technical challenges, in addition to some other challenges that we have, for example, by being able to work in different cultures all over the world, which is a challenge, but also on the other hand, it's eye-opening for us. So this is very exciting work all the time, and in addition of that, also it's fulfilling. At the end of the day, you recognize that you are doing something that is actually very beneficial to all people on the planet.
Yeah, well said. Let me ask you this question. This is always a fun question I get sometimes as president. Um, if you go back and talk to young med, maybe it's high school med or college med or university med, is there anything you would tell that person to do differently, or maybe to encourage to do, or what would be your message?
I would say that the main message is that you need to keep in mind that number one, try to work on something that you like to do, you're passionate about. Find the area that you are passionate about that actually make you feel good working on it. This way, when you get up in the morning and go to work, you're not going to work. You're going to do something you like. And that is a very important is an important part. So find out what are you passionate about and try to pursue that. Number two is that there is no substitute for hard work. You need to work because after all, this is why we are on this planet. We need to work in order to help yourself, help your family, help your community, and help everybody else in the world. So there is no substitute for hard work. So you may as well, as I mentioned, you may as well be working on something that you're passionate about. And then the third thing is that you need to recognize that you are never going to stop learning. You're always going to be development, always going to be changes happening, and you need to continue to learn and keep updated about all the areas that you're working on for you to be able to continue to do your work at a level that will actually end up being helpful to everybody around you. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what you work in, as long as you give it your best. And if you work on something you're passionate about and you give it your best, you are going to find that you are going to have you're going to be fulfilled. You're going to have you're going to be happy. You're not going to be you are going to actually be enjoying life, and that is, after all, what we're all looking for.
Yeah, there's no substitute for hard work, is there? So let's have a quick little bit of fun here, Med. Looking back on your career, how would you sum it up in, say, 2 or 3 words? What would be 2 or 3 words that you think would kind of sum up your career?
I would say that I am blessed, I'm excited, and I have an exciting career and fulfilling career.
Nice. So blessed, excited, and fulfilled. That's great. Well, Med, I guess before we close, I'll just offer up to you. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss? Anything we didn't cover? I know we covered a lot of things, but anything else you'd like to leave everybody with?
I would say that number one, we need to recognize the foresight of the people that we are working with. It actually starts with the AIME, the American Institute of Mining Engineers, where more than 100 years ago, they had the foresight to recognize that there is this new energy thing called oil that we actually need to embrace, and we need to actually have it as part of our work. And this is why petroleum engineering became part of AIME. So, and the looking forward and recognizing what is happening is very important. And we need to be thankful for AIME for all the work that they've done before we became. We're still part of AIME, but SPE now is its own part since 1957. And then the other thing which is very important for us to recognize is that although we started as American, AIME, American Institute, we recognized very clearly that this industry is not American, it's worldwide. And this is why we became an international society of petroleum engineers. And we have right now more of our members outside the United States than inside the United States. And we are going to continue to be looking at the future. We continue to be looking at the future. And as I mentioned before, energy is going to be needed, is going to be diversified, going to be different forms of energy. We will continue to be doing the development of the technology, and we be needing to developing the technology in the additional forms of energy that lends itself directly to our work. And in order for us, because we are needed to be an important part of the energy equation. So keep the foresight of the people that came before us and how they look to the future. And we need to learn from that, and we'll continue to do that as we build and plan for the future of our technical societies as well as our industry.
Well, that's a great sum up, Med. I appreciate the comments. I have to say this has been a fascinating time for me. I've known you for a long time, but getting to know you better and your career and your life story has been very inspirational. So congratulations on that inspirational journey. I just want to say again, thank you so much again for being willing to share your story with AIME. It's been a distinct privilege that you chose me to interview you and spend this time, and also to get to work with you over the years. So, just want to wish you all the best and continued success in the future.
Thank you, Terry, and thanks to SPE and AIME for allowing me to share my thoughts with the other members.